Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to join us this evening to learn a little bit about virtual production. We are going to start with introductions. I'll go first and give a brief introduction, and then we can go down the line, and you guys can introduce yourselves from start to finish, how you got into the career. Take your time. I'm Christy Pride. I've worked in video games in some capacity for about 20 years. I've done AAA to mobile to indie. I've done marketing, 2D animation, you name it. And now I'm the executive director at Playcrafting, and I focus on consulting and throwing events to benefit game developers.
Hello, my name's Ben Baker. I've worked in post-production and visual effects for 24 years now. I was the head of department. I ran the digital lab at Framestore in London for 10 years. I got sponsored into the US to set up a mobile services department at a company called 1619 in Manhattan here. I've been the VP of post-production for Vice Media, the VP of studio services for HBO. We started Mesh because I had finished the fellowship, and then there were a lot of companies, studios, networks that were trying to navigate their way through virtual production. So we really started, myself and a business partner, we started doing breakdowns, and that led to a lot of consulting work, advising on setting up stages, advising on workflow, doing financial analysis on studio jobs that had been through virtual production. Our highlight, we set up the virtual art department for Megalopolis at Trilith, and a few other projects as well.
Hi, I'm Komal Bhukanwala. I oversee all of the creative for CBS Sports. I've been in the sports business, I think, for the last 17 or 18 years. Started as a designer in print, but slowly graduated to doing 3D design, and then in the last decade have been focusing on everything virtual production, from AR to XR to MR to VR, all of the letters. And it's been a fun journey. I was probably the first to introduce virtual technology to CBS Sports. I am dating myself a little bit, but it was an exciting time, more than 15 years ago. And the technology has come a long way since then, and I've been a part of the growth of that technology inside of the sports business.
Awesome. Hey there, thanks for coming. Thanks to SVA for having us. My name is Julian Moncada. I am the co-founder and co-CEO of a company called Turbo. We're a startup based in New York, and we're building a modern game engine and gaming backend that's intended to make game developers' lives a lot easier. So our mission is to make it a lot easier, more efficient, and less expensive for indie game devs, be them individual or teams, to launch games from anywhere in the world and get them out to their players really quickly. Prior to this, I had a few roles in gaming, and I also spent the better part of a decade in New York as a venture capitalist at a media and software-focused fund called Lair Hippo Ventures, where we invest in a lot of modern and novel media companies like BuzzFeed, Now This News, Food 52, and a bunch of other ones. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Hi, Joseph White. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for having all of us. Thank you for coming to hear about virtual production. I do think it is here to stay. I mean, it's really been kind of in the limelight for the last 3 years. I started working on it 3 years ago with people who had been doing it for 12 years. I started out, I came to New York, wanted to be a filmmaker. I got lucky. I was Francis Coppola's apprentice for 2 years. I actually worked on Megalopolis for 2 years, 20-something years ago. Like, a lot of that footage is in the film. But it was a great experience. I learned a lot from him. And one day I was sitting in a room with him and George Lucas, and they really said, like, they pushed this hard. They said, you have to make art with the technology of the day. And so that never left me. I worked with Spike Lee for 9 years. I was at Marvel for 2 years, which is really where I got into the virtual production bug. And I was at a few different companies since then, and no one really bit, so I just decided to start my own business, and the time was right with the pandemic. So it's been a pretty interesting run.
Awesome. So virtual production can sound a bit nebulous to people that are not familiar with the concept. How would you succinctly explain virtual production to somebody not in the field?
I'll give it a go. Virtual production is the incorporation of digital or virtual assets in a live camera situation. I mean, there's a lot of other applications as well. I think certainly from your reel, where there's a different definition. But, you know, I mean, for what you think, if you see The Mandalorian or those kind of things, what it is it's putting a virtual or digital asset into the same space as your camera and recording with a camera and recording those elements live. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah, I'd probably say I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Cool. So a bit of a generic question, but students like to know, what does your day-to-day, your week-to-week, or your project-to-project look like?
You do not want to be in the sports business. It's like no other. It's at a pace that is so fast. My day starts with talking about, you know, what we're going to do in our games this week, this weekend. And it might end with a challenge that is coming in golf like 3 months from now. So, you know, currently I have probably about 7 or 8 projects that are running live at the same time. On the weekend, on Fridays and Saturdays, we oversee college football, and we have a live virtual production going on from New York, happening in various parts of the country. You know, we plan, we design, we develop within 4 hours for, you know, a game like that. We're working in Unreal Engine to design graphics that are storytelling graphics. So that starts on a Wednesday, ends and has to be delivered by a Friday. We do long-term planning for sports that are coming in January. So, you know, bunch of Zoom calls talking about how we can innovate in golf and Masters and, you know, March Madness. So it goes on and on.
Yeah, my day right now is, I would say no 2 days are alike. It's you know, our company's quite small, and I kind of come at things right now from like the entrepreneurial bent. So from the startup bent more so, I suppose, the tech startup bent. And so a lot of my days right now, you know, our main focus is on building our engine and getting it in front of game developers to sort of one day rival an Unreal or Unity. So right now, it's sort of like setting up projects and then finding the right people to staff them. And right now, our project is getting in front of game developers, getting their feedback. And so any day might involve putting out a fire, or on other days, I'm taking like a 10,000 foot view of new projects we could get. And so we have tech development going, we're getting in front of people, but then again, you know, we might want to, often with like marketing and distribution, get in front of people in a new way. And so I kind of have to spearhead that, define what it means, keep our big goals in mind. And yeah, every day is quite different, and you kind of have to set your own priorities when things are as early as they are for us right now.
I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know, eventually, I worked at kind of helped run larger companies. Eventually, it's like you have so much stuff going on that you're like drinking out of a fire hose, and it's less of just like trying to make something from nothing in the beginning.
I would say, yeah, the day-to-day is really just helping other people stay organized and making sure that they're communicating, and that when they're communicating, they're understanding what they're saying to each other. Like you might say to someone, you know, you might have watched 2 people have a conversation and say, all right, so we're going to make it blue. And they're like, great. And I'll say, whoa, wait. That blue or that blue? And one person will say, yeah, that blue. And the other person will say, oh, I'm glad you said that because I thought that blue. So I think it's really just about hiring the right people and letting them do their jobs. And you know, and then your job is just to make sure that they feel trusted and empowered and enabled to do their work. I mean, you guys are coming along at a really, really interesting time. I mean, things are changing so fast right now. So I think probably a big part of all of our day is like keeping up with like what's happening with AI, what's happening with new tools that are becoming available to us. Like you guys will speak a language that I'll never speak when it comes to programming and, you know, designing game engines. Like, so. Yeah, it changes day to day.
So speaking of hiring the correct people, hiring the right people, what qualifications would you say you need to start working in virtual production?
I always say if I have your humility and your curiosity and your dedication, that's all I need to work with. I
probably
think
agree,
that,
yeah.
I mean, you, like, look, I got the coffee. I still get the coffee sometimes. You know, like, and I don't care. Like, I mean, I work on stuff that I just love. I mean, you know, my father said, you know, love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Even though it can be hard, even though it can be stressful, like, my brain will wake me up at 4:30 in the morning, like, let's go.
When I was at Vice, and I was running post for an enormous team. There are 1,000 people who went into that building every day. It's now Chapter 11. It's gone. But at the time, like I was there, I saw the peak, right? I saw the high tide mark, and they had this really elaborate kind of exam about editing terms and everything, which I completely got rid of because what you got was a lot of savant people who knew all the terms. My main criteria, certainly for entry-level positions, is can I stand to be in the same room as this person for longer each week than I see my children, right? That was the criteria because I'll know within about 30 minutes whether you've lied on your resume. I'll know within about an hour and a half that you actually can or can't do the work. And I can train you, but it's like, do you know how to speak to someone? Do you know how to write a sentence in an email? Like those are the things for entry-level people that are kind of missing a lot of times. You find people whose parents will go to their job interview.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
check that out. I've had to
Yep.
say to a parent, you know, Mum, you got to stay outside.
It sounds like this has happened to you a couple times.
Yeah, and it's crazy because it's like, it's so true. Like we work in the communication business, but most people don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
And it is probably one of their biggest downfalls. I'll be honest, I rarely look at someone's resume. I rarely look at what school they went to. It's always how can you carry yourself in an interview? You know, do you have the attitude to work? And I'll speak for myself in the sports business. It's a very, very challenging environment. You need to dedicate time. You need to sometimes sacrifice time with your family. And are you ready for that dedication? And the technical aspect of the job, anyone can learn. It's really that attitude and the enthusiasm to do and love what you do.
I totally co-sign that. I also don't really care about resumes. I'll skim them. It's all about your personal skills. So don't bring your parents to your interviews.
Do not.
Please do not.
So if you guys
And
wanna-
don't say, I want your job to the interviewer.
oh, yeah.
Don't
That's
say
the
that.
No.
worst. It's not
Don't-
cheeky.
Don't
It's
say that.
not
It's
cute.
boring and you're out
yeah.
of the interview.
Absolutely correct. What are some challenges you guys face in your early careers in virtual production? Any good stories?
Well, I think that a lot of we haven't had a generation yet that learnt virtual production at school and then came into the workforce and they were like, we need a virtual production. So you come on board. So it's really about the portability of skills. And in virtual production, there's a number of different layers, right? So there is in kind of LED volumes, those big LED things that you've seen. There's if you work at the facility, there's a number of roles there. There's a number of engineering role. I mean, and Joe ran a very cool space called the car stage. That was his reel there. You know, if you're working at the facility, there's a completely different skill set than if you're creating content for the wall or if you're a client of the wall. And then you've got different roles like the key roles on any crew, cinematographer, production design, probably the writer as well. And each of those roles can have an effect on what happens in that volume.
Yeah.
And so, like, my answer to that is, what are you doing now? Like, are you a 3D artist? Are you a compositor? Do you know about game engines? Do you know about 3D space? Well, then that is going to push you probably into that content creation. If you're really good, computer operator. If you can, certainly if you're in compositing and stuff, then you could probably be a disguise operator or something. You could probably operate a stage, There's a very broad set of skills that funnel into what virtual production is.
Yeah, and I think, for someone like me, when you come from a design background and now I'm overseeing most of these virtual production projects, it really is, you got to know a little bit of everything. You know, you got to know enough about tracking to talk to the tracking guy and make sure that it's working correctly, and you got to know enough about LED volumes to make sure you're talking about them to the manufacturers and telling them what you really want and what kind of LEDs you want. So you have to sort of run that whole gamut, and nobody teaches you that in school, right? It's sort of learning on the job and just being curious about every aspect of everything that you do. I was completely unrelated. I was at a tire shop getting my tire fixed 2 days ago, and I'm asking the guy, like, what are you doing to my tire? And the owner comes to me, like, are you overseeing what he's doing? I'm like, no, he's working on my car. I need to know what he's doing to my car. I need to ask him the right questions so the next time it happens, I'm prepared. So I think it's that kind of attitude where ask the right questions, learn on every project, and know that you're not the smartest person in the room, that there are people who are way smarter than you that you should rely on to get the right project and to make your project successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of broken into industries like through the side door. Like I didn't go to, my co-founder and I both didn't go to like a school that was really known for technology or media. And as a result, I ended up working in finance to start, but I really wanted to work in technology. So I kind of followed my curiosity, like you're saying, and what that means on like a practical level is I just did what everyone's doing in this room. Like I was going to as many panels as I could after school, like after work when I started working, just to get that additional almost like knowledge base under my belt. And that, you know, to be honest, that still wasn't enough. So I tried to always find ways to stand out on top of that. So I learned software development as a way to sort of like augment my business experience. And when I would go into job interviews, I would sort of show people apps I made and stuff like that. So I ended up working kind of on a lot of emerging tech like VR and AR and stuff like that at my firm, because they just kind of saw me as like the very curious, kind of technically inclined person. And I think that has also helped in gaming. So what I would say, like to translate that into advice, is I actually think nowadays, because of so much modern tooling, like AI, honestly, even like YouTube, it's so easy to get like a cursory knowledge of something that if you don't have a cursory knowledge of something, you might like, you might not stand out, and you might stand out in the wrong way. So I can't tell you how many like, I mean, I'm very, very impressed because a lot of our younger employees and interns and entry-level employees, like, they go and pick up coding, like, to make games, because that's part of what we do. And I'm like, how, you know, when I was tell people before, like, oh, I code, they would look at it like some mystic science. Now they're like, oh, I just go on YouTube, ChatGPT helps me out, and I just want to understand what's going on more. So I think that like leaning into that, I don't want to say it's requisite because it sounds extreme, but it is really, really important. And I would just allow yourself to be creative about how you learn things and lean into it.
Yeah, I think for me, in the beginning, it's education. Like a lot, I mean, and it's still education. Like, you know, there's a lot of people. I just came from a conference last week, the Unreal Fest, and there were, you know, a lot of the CTOs and CEOs of the major companies are there. And we're all having a similar experience from different perspectives. Like, there aren't a lot of people who know how to do this stuff. And so, like, the time is really right. I mean, you know, on the other hand, like, we also have to help create the jobs, but it kind of goes hand in hand because, like, I'm in the DGA, and you know, the DGA 3 years ago thought, well, you know, virtual production is really interesting, but like, you know, in 3 years it'll be something else. It's not. I mean, you know, I get clients all the time, whether on film, TV, or commercials, who come in and say, you know, I did this before, I had a bad experience, but I've seen your work, and I think that I will have a better experience with you. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's my goal right now. I'm trying to make it more about what's best for the project than what's best for me. There are a lot of different ways to come at it, and like you just made a great point. I mean, I do wonder what it's going to be like, you know, having the younger schooled people come into the space, because when I started doing it and I jumped right in, and you know, you're a lot of times with this stuff, you're right there with the director and the producer and the actors. I mean, you're in that inner circle, and like a lot of people go their whole life and they don't ever get anywhere near that. And so when you show up and you're involved in that right away, like you have to come correct. And I always was a little concerned. Like people used to say to me, like, "Oh, you know, like how are you going to teach that?" And I wondered, how do you teach it? Because like, you know, for me, it's like 20 years of getting punched in the face to know how to like deal with that situation. But I was surprised to see that, like, just in repetition. I met a young woman who, you know, still lives with her parents in Queens, and she came basically to help us out with the office. And like now she's an awesome disguise programmer, and she's sitting there with, you know, like high-end, you know, big ego DPs and directors. Like, let me show you, you know, let's do some storyboards. Like, so yeah, it can work for everybody. And again, like, you know, your time is now. You know, like it really is there. So I encourage people, like, just, you know, yes, watch the YouTube videos, come to the panels, you know, ask ChatGPT, like, educate yourself in every way possible.
Yeah. So we've established that virtual production is like relatively new, and we're all still kind of figuring it out from a career standpoint. But what would you say are some early career roles for students looking to enter virtual production?
Okay. So let's look at the virtual art department with the content creators, right? So a background in any 3D, any manipulation of 3D objects, and that can be creation. Are you good at photography? That'll lead you into photogrammetry, NURFs, building models. Can you model? That's one way in. Another way would be, can you take a photo and segment it, depth segment it, and get some parallel? You know, that's another skill. These are all skills. And I think what they're saying is right. Like, no workplace is going to take you on as an apprentice that you know nothing and go like, oh, wow, here's a mouse and here's a pen and a tablet. Because, I mean, the bar is set that you can learn Unreal Engine for nothing. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that's stopping you is you from doing, you know, you're the only one stopping it. It's virtually free. You can get Unreal Engine for free if you have a computer. Now, you're not going to be able to do finely rendered kind of 16K kind of renders on any computer, but you can do the basics of scene blocking. Mm-hmm. So layout. Mm-hmm. Layout, that's another one. Once you've got the assets, then you're putting them out into a virtual environment. That's layout. Then you get to lighting. Then you probably need a background in maybe cinematography because you're placing camera. You need to know about lensing. You kind of need to know about lighting and how to light a scene. And again, YouTube is your friend, though. All of these things.
University of YouTube, we love her.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's, you know, trying to first identify where do you fit in. Obviously, knowing about virtual production, and like he mentioned, it's the content creation, there's the production design, there's the camera side, there's the tech side. Knowing which part of it you want to sort of at least start with is kind of important, because content creation is so different from being on, you know, camera tracking and LED volume and building, and or even being on the production side, whether it's, you know, you're a camera person or you know, on the art side. First, I think knowing which part of it you want to get into would be helpful, so that you can start to like focus. Some people are just born content creators, right? It's you love making things, you love building in Unreal, you love Maya, you love 3D Studio, you love all of those softwares that help you make what you want to make. And then some people are just extremely good on the tech side, you know, coding, and, you know, we use softwares like Pixatope and Orizos that are just like constantly coming up that require some heavy duty coding. And then there's the complete tech side where, you know, you're building volumes and you're overseeing the color correction of those volumes. And, you know, there's so much within this space that it's just nice to identify where do you want to start. And once you've got that identified, you could at least get your foot in the door, and after that start to sort of understand more about the world. And then, you know, you might completely change and be like, no, I actually prefer being on the tracking side. So I think it's start somewhere.
Yeah, I think if you're trying to figure out where you even want to start, because maybe you're just like interested, but it's based on like vibes, which is like a thing now, you know. So you haven't thought about like, how am I going to pay rent? You're just like pure vibes. I want that to be good. I would say just be a fan. Like in video games in particular, like it's incredibly rare to find someone who like works in the industry and isn't like a pretty big fan of video games. And I think that applies to a lot of modern like a lot of stuff now. I mean, like, so, you know, I would say this is harder because there's a kind of economic gate, but even so, like, I met people who worked in VR, AR production, who still do, who were just huge fans of the industry. They didn't necessarily own all the gear. Sometimes they'd never used a bunch of the gear, but they knew what was going on. They were following, like, all the forums to see what new releases were. I think right now, like, this is gonna sound super random, but I almost feel like one of like the modern resume builders is like if you can make a crazy environment in Roblox or Minecraft or Epic, because it's like, it's something, you know? And I've seen people build insane Unreal rivals, like meaning like rivals to AAA games in Roblox. And I'm sure in doing so, they learn what they like. And then as an ancillary benefit, while they're doing that, they'll learn like the benefits of stuff. So a lot of times, like, when you're working on projects and stuff, you'll find what you like. Like for me, there's certain parts of programming I do not like, and that's why I have a co-founder, and there's certain parts of creative he doesn't like, and that's why we work well together. And we just learned that through trial and error of trying projects.
Yeah, I would say, you know, great answers. Like, do the work. I mean, really, do the work. Don't be afraid of it. I mean, a lot of people I know, you know, we jokingly call ourselves like, you know, 20-year overnight successes. You know, like you got to put the time in. You know, you be humble. Like, don't be afraid to put the time in, because it's hard. I don't know what it is. You know, it's been happening for years. There's a lot of people that kind of come out of the gate and like right away they're like, I should be the boss. I'm like, no, dude. Like,
Well, that's what you want to say in your job interview. Like, you want to go into a job interview. So if you were interviewing to be in a virtual art department for a film, right? And you want to go in and say, oh yeah, I made this game, I built an environment, I did layout on this tropical sunset, what do you think? Then immediately you're engaged with the person, right? And they're like, how did you do this? Where'd you get the sky from? How did you do the sky scene? You know, you just get into that conversation. What is the palm tree asset? It looks a bit low poly, could you push it back? You know, like anything, right? Because you're getting past are you a nice person? Like, you're getting into the work, right?
Yeah.
And that's the only way, I really think now that you're going to cut through the noise, is to do your own work in your own time and have stuff that you're proud of. Because unless you're the kind of person that's going to mess around with a little shader to try and get it right, like, there are going to be people that'll run you over on your way to that job, right? That's the level of detail you're getting into.
And you might be better at it than you think you will right now. Like one of the best, I was just reading about like one of the most impressive like photorealistic Roblox servers is made by someone who was like in college and didn't know anything about using shaders. And to this day, like people want to, I think someone wants to like buy their like code base or something. But to this day, the person's like, I don't know how to use shaders very well. Like I'm just learning. And I think they genuinely mean that because they've been working on it like a year and a half. So you might find that like, again, through, like I really believe you can learn stuff at a much faster velocity than before. And also sometimes the bar technically isn't super high. It's more about like approaching things creatively from a new bent and just sticking with it, you know?
people will know if you're dedicated, if you're interested, and if you're hardworking. Like they're gonna spot you right away, and they're gonna hold on to you. I mean, I know a lot of people who, I mean, one of the first jobs, Megalopolis, I think I was making $800 a week, working 6 days a week. You know, like, you know, or like when I worked at Lucasfilm, there was like, you know, here's $300, but like you're gonna have us on your resume, and like it was worth it. You know, it was absolutely worth it. I mean, one of the best programmers I know told me, like, she's like, yeah, I used to just go for 10 years. Whenever somebody who was like really good at the job was in town and I wasn't working, I would just go and be like, hey, can I just hang out and learn from you? And it paid off. I mean, you know, 10 years is a long time, but, you know, again, do the work.
I mean, Unreal Engine isn't the only access point into
No,
this.
it
No,
isn't.
in fact,
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah,
It's
I mean, it's
not.
not even really. Most virtual production is 2D plates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, 2D playback.
But I wanted to say, like, if you choose to look at Unreal Engine, then there is an enormous user base, particularly in entertainment. I mean, there's the games user base, which is enormous, but then there's a user base in entertainment that's very dedicated and very open, and you can go on either Epic Games' site to look at what they've done and all their free courses and everything else, or any of the user groups. I mean, we do a lot of crewing, and the first thing we do for Megalopolis, we found that there were 3 main Discord groups for Unreal Engine people. One of them was entertainment, 2 of them were games, and we just hit those groups. And that you've got to find those people and kind of put your work, the work you're doing, the nice sunset that you've done in Unreal Engine, the pastoral scene, whatever, you put that up and go, I was having a problem with, contact with the ground plate. And then you'll get 15 people who are like, have you tried this? You should try that. Try the slider on this thing. And then once you're engaged in that conversation, then that is the same conversation you're going to be having with your employer. That same level of detail, that same level of attention to detail. Because that's what people are really looking for, is like, do you have the attention to detail that you can sustain in this?
But you're also, I think, with what you're saying, you're also building your support network. I mean, some of the, like, Live Effects Assimilate, I don't know if you've gotten a chance to mess around with that at all.
No.
It's, it's really interesting. I mean, it's for car process or, standard virtual production, it's a lot more, the UI is much more like what film people are used to, and it works much better with the lighting patterns. But their Discord group, like, there are some really heavy hitters on there who are like, color science, inventors of special new light fixtures and things like that. And if you go in there and you just say, ask a simple question, you'll get an answer from like a legend who's like, hey, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up. Let's figure this out together. I mean, Unreal Fest, this last week was the 3rd one that I went to. That's where we met. And it's remarkable because you're in a room with, 3,000 people who are, theoretically competitors of one another, but they're all trying to figure out how to work together and like grow this field, and like it's just fascinating.
Are there any emerging technologies or programs that you think students should start learning now?
AI.
Yeah.
Learn how to prompt AI.
I mean,
No question.
I'm not an AI fan, but I do think the procedural functions, procedural blender, you need to, if you need to make like 40 square miles of countryside for a project, like you want to do it procedurally. You do not want to be doing layout on 10,000 trees, You want to learn that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do think from my experience, knowing Unreal is great, but it's currently I'm lacking coders. I really need coders. So anybody here who wants to code, to really tap into the power of Unreal, obviously we have the creative side, but for us, from a sports production and workflow standpoint, it's really every aspect of our business is now looking for coders. And I
What
do
are you
think
looking for? C++ and
C++, we're looking at blueprinting, we're looking at Python, because we have so many different platforms. We're, looking at ROS expression coders, like so many different platforms that we work on simultaneously, that I do think the one fiber that connects all of our platforms is really that coding knowledge. So if there was something tangible that, I'd put out there, I'd be like, coding is my biggest sort of need right now.
one of the biggest unsung jobs in visual effects facilities and pipeline TD.
Yeah,
That's what that job is.
that's
is
what
like
that coding, like
doing
building that
integration
pipeline.
Scripts.
Yeah.
How do I get this information in this package out to that information in that package?
And then
Because-
how do you make
yeah.
it sort of usable across all of your broadcasts, right? Like, and live play out, right? We are heavy into live play out. So to build a pipeline that allows for live play out, we don't have the time to finesse lighting and all of that on a daily basis, on a minute by minute basis. That's for VFX and film productions, but for live broadcast, you have all of sometimes 45 minutes to fix your lighting and go on air. So to build a pipeline where you're able to react to a director's calling really is that coding base that you're able to expose all of the lighting features from Unreal and make sure it's available for your operator, and you can do that all within 10 minutes of somebody asking you to put it on air.
So scary.
They're very scary.
So scary.
I mean, I got credits on a Bond film. I worked on all the Narnia films. Building Vice News Tonight, the live news show, was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my career.
Yeah, it
We
is.
would record an interview at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in London, and it would be on air at 7 o'clock playing out of New York here. It's no joke, live television.
I've recorded something in commercial break and put it on air right after that commercial break. So, you know,
Or someone calling the show is like, hold that segment, push it, we're still waiting for the end bumper, like play something else.
So stress management.
Yeah.
Yes.
Learning to manage your stress is going to be hugely beneficial if you want to work in live virtual production.
Absolutely.
How do you see virtual production impacting the future of filmmaking and gaming?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think it already has impacted various aspects of whether it's films, you know, gaming, live broadcast. I do think that, and again, I'll speak from my perspective, being able to, traditionally, sports or live broadcast was so used to that 2D graphic on air, on screen, information design, all of that was very flat and, you know, simple. Now there is so much more enhanced storytelling that you can do with like player tracking and, you know, visualizing that. And the audience now wants to consume all of that. They're looking to, you know, any kid these days watching a game is interested in stats of that particular quarterback that they have on fantasy, and they're looking for that running back and all of his entire history, and putting that out in a live broadcast and playing into that fantasy aspect of the live broadcast along with these technologies is really what enhances our storytelling on a day-to-day basis, and that's what engages the viewer. And then it, you know, transpires across all of social mediums, and, you know, that's how you're sort of hooking the audience. And I think for sports, one of the biggest challenge we have is how do you continue to sort of evolve your audience from the, you know, 40s to 50s to now having the younger generation sort of getting hooked and continuing that viewership across, you know, the 20s and the teens, who can't even watch a video for more than like 10 seconds, right? Like, how do you have them hook onto a broadcast for 2.5 hours and have them feel engaged? So now it's this trend of like gamifying your broadcast, and all of that is throwing a great amount of technology at these broadcasts. So I do feel like virtual production has already sort of changed our industry. We've had to embrace it. CBS is a very traditional media, and, you know, we're governed by people who believe that keep your screen sort of clean and let the game sort of be as clean as possible without the, you know, all the tech thrown at it. But we've had to change our philosophy. So I do think it's already sort of changed our world, and I think the generation today is going to continue to gamify our world. You know, I can't find a better word than saying the live sports broadcast is getting gamified, and it's continuing down that path.
I think that I'm really, I can't describe what it'll look like, but I feel like everything's going to be much more social than it is today. And I don't mean like Twitter social. I mean, like, you know, the experience most people have under the age of, you know, at least under the age of like 20 consuming content on the web is typically involves like, especially in gaming, involves their friends being right there with them and almost like what feels like a 3D telepresence. And I think that will permeate into every other form of media we have. I don't know if it's going to be like through VR goggles and AR glasses. You know, there's a lot of money going into that, and so if you looked 10 years from now and look back on it, it might seem obvious that it will be that way. But even if it's not, I think just the broadcast and things like that and the way we consume content will involve people more. And you can even think of like, I don't know, right now you might think of even like TikTok remix responding as like an example of that, or people playing games on TikTok like with each other, with live video going, or, you know, there's a lot of, we're on the verge of that happening. And I actually do think, what's funny is like on the AI side, I wasn't a big AI person, besides for coding, because it is actually very useful there. And I'm still not a big AI person until I am. And so something happened to me today that like really made me realize AI is kind of legit, where we're working on a sizzle reel for a game and I need a song, and we have someone who knows how to make some bangers on Sumo AI. And I was like, okay, I'm a musician. Like, I don't like the idea of, using AI for music. Like, it's sacrilege to me, but as a business person, like, I needed a song for our video person, like, within a day. And I had kind of two options. I could either like pay more to have someone like produce a song, or get like a pretty good song through this person who knows how to do it for like in an hour. And it worked out. And I think prompt engineering is still so up and down in terms of like how good you can make the product, that it's hard to like pin it down as a necessary thing. But I have some friends who know how to use Runway, Sumo, things like that, and they can make really, really good product. And I think the more that permeates workplaces, like the more that will be in demand.
Yeah, I just got a serious lesson in Runway last week.
Yeah.
No, it's happening. I mean, there's no stopping that, like embrace it. I mean, I know there's a lot of like fears and concerns, but there's a lot of pluses to it too. And I mean, I'm going to personally focus on the pluses and train people around me to focus on the pluses. Yeah, look, virtual production's been around for at least 12 years, and it's only the last 3 years that it's really getting a lot of attention, and it's just kind of taking off at this insane rate right now, and there is a hunger for it. I mean, I'll speak more on the film and television side because that's like my primary focus. This is an industry right now that's kind of in tatters. It's this last year of the strike, not strike, meaning like there was not a lot of work because there was fear of another strike, and the previous year of having 2 major strikes, and then just kind of like the realization of what's been going on with fudging numbers in Hollywood. You're now at a point where it's an industry that's trying to redefine itself. It's trying to come back. It's looking for economies of scale. I did Penguin, and Warner Brothers Games sent us Gotham City, and they were like, hey, we want you to use this as the backgrounds for Gotham City. And we back and forth with them till we got, like, it was really just motion blur, like till we got the motion blur of the game engine to the point where like it looked like a photoreal plate. And I actually want to call them and find out like what was really the point of that exercise, because now they're going to be able to say like, yeah, like you can be in the game that was just in the exact same thing that was in the movie. Like the crossover of assets or digital twins, like there's to be able now to say like, all right, like Fallout is a great example. There's now we can take that whole world and we can just pop it right into the video game, or take that world right out of the video game and pop it into the TV show or the movie. So that's it's just going that way. Yeah, it's here.
I think the way that studios are set up is kind of counter to actually real, and I'm talking about features here. Networks can do this much more easily, is to have a resource that then they build a pipeline around. Mm-hmm. The trouble with feature films, and to series to a kind of lesser extent, because series you kind of have a run at things, you'll get a 40-week schedule. Feature films you never build any infrastructure for it, right? It's got to be this company that winds up, produces the film, hands out the studio, and then winds down and can't own any assets, right? And so that means that, and the studios themselves, the way that they have kind of come to be is they're like hedge funds with roller coasters attached to them and theme parks attached to them. And what they're doing is, you've got a film, we've got this film we've developed, I'm going to give it to you as a producer, and then you're going to go off and find your own resources and do everything. So you might do virtual production, and you'll realize some of the gains from that. But where you're actually getting the gains is if you looked across a whole slate of work. And I do a lot of economic analysis of virtual production jobs. I've done that for Paramount, I've done that for Amazon Studios. And time again, you see this thing where it's like, there was this one set. We did one set in virtual production because the production designer told us it was going to be $3.5 million. They actually saved $2.2 million on that, and they produced it for just over $1 million. That's renting the volume and the asset, right? Now I worked out if they had done it in green screen compositing, they would have only saved themselves about $800,000 off the $3.5 million. Mm-hmm. But so you look at that across a whole budget, and it's like, well, you saved 8%. And they're like, how come it wasn't more? And I was like, well, do more scenes. You did one
Right.
you did one setup. And the rest, you shot green screen. You shot green screen set extensions, or you shot out on location, the most expensive way of shooting something. And so what the challenge is for studios, and which are not set up to do this, like I'm suggesting, is to have a set of resources, is to build a big mega wall, and then to tell every production, you got to use that mega wall. And we're going to limit your budget so you can only use that mega wall. And then you'll really get the gains. But at the moment, with this kind of, I mean, what does Disney produce now? 4 films a year? I mean, they're winding it down. And so there's less opportunity to realize the real gains. I mean, through I think it's anywhere from 10 to 12%, right up to 40% you can save off in virtual production. That's against production design and against green screen compositing, right? But you're not going to really move the needle unless you're doing that across the whole slate.
Yep.
And I'll finish that by saying, movie studios are not going to solve their problem of rapid deleveraging. They owe too much money on assets that are worth nothing. They're not going to do that by using AI to cut out seating designers and someone who's doing storyboards. That is not going to be the answer to studios' problems. They need to rapidly deleverage and get all this junk off their balance sheets. Paramount was sold for, what was it, $1.1 billion, $2 billion?
Yep.
That is essentially the price of the real estate in downtown LA. Everything else they own is junk.
Hey.
I'm sorry. I mean Paramount Movie Studios. I don't mean like the whole thing. But it is true that there's a whole bunch of assets on that
There
lot
is,
at
yep.
Paramount that are just like,
Yeah, the dead weight.
yeah, they're dead weight. They can't deleverage. That's the problem with movie studios. They owe too much money on assets that are. It's like that great line from what's the Apple Network television thing, and that the movie the like news executive character says, it just might happen that the whole of broadcast TV could just fall off a cliff and die, and this is what they're. I mean, I was at HBO, right? They had a whole play-out center at Long Island, but they spent millions of dollars over 15 years to build. It was essentially worth zero when HBO Max started.
Yeah.
And they got rid of that site, and they just had, that's what rapid deleveraging is about. You spent 15, 20, 40 million dollars building this site that you can plug an Ethernet cable into the wall and do the same thing now.
And I think going to what we said in the beginning, like when we were talking about, I think you said like communication's a big part of the job, and like getting 2 or 3 people to agree on a shade of blue. It kind of, I feel like the rubber hits the road, like, big picture wise on making big decisions like this. You have to, even the thing with Warner Brothers, like getting the idea of like, oh, we should all just use the same assets across games and movies or shows is kind of sounds good, but actually getting a lot of people to do something is really, 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 really tough. And
it's not, the level of coordination isn't set up like that either.
Yeah, and the coordination,
it's one whole team over there making Gotham City, and then there's this team over here trying to shoot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's never just like, hey, we're doing it this way now. That's never how it works, for good reason. Like, it's not like things just aren't set up to work that way. But in some ways, like the fun part about one's career is when you're doing more of like, hey, I'm going to learn to code to like get this job. That's going to be like, I just got to learn how to do this thing right. And like for some people, like the less fun part is as you grow, because then it is just all coordinating, communicating. And while those skills may sound like kind of qualitative and frivolous, like doing so has really, really big consequences, like to how your business operates and the results.
I mean, I think sports and news pipelines are the biggest beneficiary of it, because you can get an asset, get the LED wall, get your smart studio, and then you can just really use it in all sorts of different functions.
No, you're right about that, but to your point, and I think you've been doing this for a while, it's like even within Paramount, when you have to have the news division and the sports division and the pictures division all sort of come to a conclusion that this is the technology we're going to use. Like they don't even see eye to eye on that. So it's like there's so much wastage of resources within even a single company that, to your point, like news and sports can sort of combine, but there are so many challenges underneath that. But they're too entirely different workflows, entirely different. Like, I think our business is quick turnaround, and news is like even faster.
Yeah.
Right. So it's.
Pardon my interjection,
yeah.
but we do have to move into the Q&A. Listen, it's okay. We still have time to yap, but it is time for Q&A. So if you do have a question, please line up at one of the two mics. You can see them here in the aisle. Please be careful when you approach them. Again, introduce yourself. Keep it succinct. Keep it short. You don't need to sell yourself.
Hi. First of all, thank you all so much for your time. I'm Ollie Lee. I'm a student cinematographer at NYU, and I'm very fascinated by the growth of virtual production in these past few years. So my question is, what would you say is the biggest obstacle or concern that's currently stunting the growth of this industry, or at least the fact that it's not as mainstream as I feel it should be? Is it technology? Is it awareness? Or maybe it's stubborn studios, as we were saying? So what would you say needs to be addressed to ensure the future growth of virtual production?
I think from our perspective, it was two things. One was the cost of it. To fruition, the cost was still extremely high. The costs are still extremely high, even now. We recently did an entire virtual production setup for the Super Bowl, and it was close to $1 million+ to set up 2 virtual stages in 2 cities, and all of the tech that comes with that, and all of the crewing that comes with that, and the content creation that comes with that. So it's still very expensive. Secondly is, I would say, given, and I'll only speak for the sports world here, is that it is the lack of knowledge on the gains that you can get from the technology. You still are fighting the fight of convincing the upper echelon of the company to be like, okay, buy into this. It's going to save you money, it's going to save you time, and it really is some cool stuff that we should be embracing. So I think it's twofold there, the cost as well as sort of getting people to buy into it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate for film and TV too. I think on the film and TV side though, it's just the general slowdown. I mean, there was a point where we were doing, around this time we'd have about, between 60 and 80 shows going in New York. And California would have like 400. And right now, New York has about 20, 25. And LA is, I think, 40, like somewhere between 40 and 60. It's it's all, I think by the beginning of next year, we're going to see kind of more of what the new normal is. We've definitely seen the high water mark in terms of, film and television production. But I think that's also an opportunity for, young people who are moving into the space right now, because again, like, everybody's asking for it. Everybody's still interested in it. Everybody's saying like, okay, like, we've tried some things, we've had some expensive failures, a lot of volumes that were built don't exist anymore. A lot of successful companies, don't exist right now. But there is still a desire, and I think once the work comes back, the need will be there, and the growth will continue.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Kai Crawford. I'm an independent filmmaker. This question is for Joseph.
Can you speak up just a little bit? So sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Much better.
So, is there ever productions that are just too big or too small for you to take on, and how do you go about choosing what project?
No, I'd take everything. I mean, if the stage isn't busy, like, I want it to, it's like playing the farm team. Like, I want everybody constantly in motion on it. So, yeah, if it's a good project and you have a good idea and you have organization, like, it's not really about the money with me. So, like, yeah, if you want to talk afterwards, if you have an idea or something you're interested in, absolutely.
Absolutely, thank you.
Hi. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm a freshman at SVA. I want to pursue maybe theater set design or film set design. And I feel like I always often hear upperclassmen talk about how they wish they had done certain things when they were a freshman. So I wanted to ask, and I feel really overwhelmed because there are just so many resources in this city. So I wanted to ask, what should I prioritize the most? Like, maybe is it networking with my professors and peers, or maybe learning certain programs, or just getting inspired, watching productions frequently, or just getting inspired? Like, what would you recommend?
I'd say all of the above. I mean, I sympathize with your generation a little bit. You guys are overwhelmed with the amount. In our time, there weren't that many resources, so we had like a one track. Like you educate yourself and you start to network and all of that. But you guys have a ton of resources, so it can get very overwhelming. But I will say a little bit of everything. Don't stop networking. I think that's really what's going to get you in your next job or your next, even, being here is sort of that path to networking and starting to understand what all of us, what our journeys were. Don't stop looking at resources. My perspective is a little bit of everything. I don't think you can choose one or the other, but to his point, like I do think that if you want to specialize in production design, like if you want the craft to get better because you feel like, you need your craft to get better before you even start networking, I'd focus on the craft first. And then, networking will follow and you're doing all the right things of, online resources and learning and all of that. But there's a ton. You're in New York City. If you're interested in theater, I feel like that's the best place to be.
I mean, it's production design you're talking about, right? So I would read a play, if it's plays that you want to get into, then work out how you would design the set for it, and then work out where you'd put an LED wall. Do you bisect the set, so you're doing it half virtually and half physically? Like, what do the actors need to touch? Then you start getting at all the production design questions. What do the actors need to touch? What do they need to be able to walk in and behind and in front of, right? Those things are real objects, excluding XR for the moment.
Yeah.
Those things are real objects that you want your actors to walk around. So they'll need to be physical objects. Are those objects repeated in the background? You'll need to scan them and then put them in the virtual environment. How far back do you go? What are the dimensions of you start to build up a profile, and you should be thinking about that with everything that you do. Like in this set that you're designing, it's a street set. If you want it to be a film set, so we assume that you can move your camera anywhere in a film. When you're watching a film, you're thinking, if they turn the camera here, I'm not going to see like the grips truck. I'm going to see the rest of the street, right? Well, that's what you've got to do in production design is work out. And I think it's kind of like an answer to the last question over here is the adoption curve needs to really increase. We need all production designers to have had some virtual production experience, and then it just becomes part of the production design palette. It doesn't need, at the moment, you almost need a super ego kind of director or a DP or someone who's like, I want to do this in virtual production.
Yeah, like a
And
choice,
like,
right?
Yeah, it's a choice. Whereas
Yes.
it's, and so then what you want, and what we're constantly, really praying for is, the production designer knows something about this and can kind of they're kind of prepared to incorporate it into their own work. That would be my advice. If it's production design, then just start. And then what are the tools? Pen and paper to begin with. Most production designers use Rhino. I don't know whether you know other programs that they use, but most of the people that we encounter are doing if they're doing anything in 3D, it's probably in Rhino first, and then you've got to work out how to import that. If you're using Unreal Engine, great. But I know a lot of production designers, classical theater production designers, use CAD programs. Excellent. Do that for a while and try and work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say, like, learn your masters and break the mold. I mean, don't shy away from the old school way that people did things. One of the things that really could work for you right now is being able to take old school production designers into the modern world. Like, learn the tools that they're going to benefit from, because then you can work with them. You can market yourself as someone who can work with them, and then help them understand. Like, a lot of people, they don't know how to. I don't know how to program. Like, I just know what I want it to look like, and I know, hiring the right people and letting them do their jobs is the best advice that I was ever given. But it sounds like you're gonna be fine. I mean, you're already in the right frame of mind. Give yourself a break. We're all overwhelmed.
Yeah, being here is like a great thing to be doing, especially freshman year. And I think broadly speaking for everyone, like there's kind of two sides to the seesaw of sorts, especially if you're doing like a craft-oriented job. Engineering is the same way. Usually what people do is the first 3 or 4 years of college, they're like, I'm just going to focus on the craft, and that's the right thing to do. I think where people get anxious is when they're a senior, they kind of realize that like the non-craft part, which is typically networking, doesn't get focused on and until they feel like it might be too late. And so, like in music schools, a lot of people are like, I'm just gonna get really good and write really good songs, then I'm just gonna move to LA, like when I graduate. And I'm just gonna and you're like, so how are you gonna get up? It's like, I don't know, I'm gonna move to LA. Like, it's just gonna happen. We're gonna get a house. Like my friend's little brother's doing exactly this, and he graduated like 6 months ago, hasn't moved. So like what happens is, maybe sprinkle on a little bit of the networking stuff to start. I think when it hits you all at once, like 6 months before graduation, it can be very overwhelming, and that's when you're like, oh, I wish I'd done this sooner. But, just sequence it out, like your craft to start, do enough of like meeting people so you kind of, can resemble a human when you're like talking to people. And then like when it's go time and you're like, all right, I'm pretty good at this. I'm either at parity with all my classmates or maybe I'm better. Then you're like, all right, now I can lean on that networking stuff and lean into it. And it's possible that you are like truly excellent and you don't have to be good with people or networking, like at any craft, especially engineering, this happens. Like if you're really, really, really good, then you can just forego the rest of it. Usually people don't get that good. So it's good to just like take one, make sure you do a little bit of the other, and then you'll be ready when the time comes.
It's also like, what is networking? What networking isn't is door stopping someone on the way to the toilets at some kind of cheesy wine party, right? And like, I got to talk. That's not networking, right? Networking is knowing the people that you want to communicate to in the room, knowing their work, and having a couple of interesting things to ask them about their work. Do not talk about your own work. People love to talk about their work. That's networking, right? That's going up to someone and saying, I saw your work in X, I really loved it because I'm doing my own thing and I had trouble with this. Bing, there's your conversation there. You can get hired by that person. But just kind of, I want to, it just doesn't, it's got to be natural. It's not, you're not going to go to one party and meet one person and then have a career. But if you can work out like whose work you're interested in the room, that's networking.
You can also start with diet networking and joining Discords in online social communities of people just like you that want to do the same things. You mentioned, I think, the Unreal Discords earlier.
Yeah.
Unreal Discords, professional groups.
Yes, exactly.
The Art Directors Guild has events in New York. You should get along to anything that you can get to with the Art Directors Guild if you're going in that direction.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, but the good news is you're already taking all the correct steps by being in New York City and being here.
Yeah.
And you know what? I moved to New York 12, 13 years ago, and I didn't know anybody in New York. I knew one person I'd been sponsored in. I just joined an organization called the New York Post Alliance. They had monthly meetings. I went along to those. Then I got involved in the events. I started running events. Like, find your community and give some time to that community, without really thinking, what am I getting out of this? What you get, that's networking again. It's being on the committee with someone who, for me, I met all of the heads of post companies within the first 3 meetings. And then I knew who I wanted to target. I wanted to talk about their work. Go. That's the...
Thank you for the question. Hi.
Hi, my name is Natasha Danilian. I am a recent graduate, let's say within the past few years of CUNY BA. My major was cross-cultural multimedia storytelling, so in that respect, I feel like I'm in the right place. But my interest is more on the storytelling end. So if I'm trying to tell a story, do you have any particular suggestions for where to focus in terms of, because I can't hire anyone to do all this work. If I'm trying to do this myself, where should I focus?
Storyboard.
Storyboard?
Storyboard, and then you'll figure out what you need, and then you won't try to create more than you need for it. And I mean, there's great tools for storyboarding now. I mean, there's living storyboards now, but it's also just a great way to get your thought in a place that you can point to it, and you can communicate it so much easier to people than, I mean, everybody's different. I mean, I know directors that I've worked with, like they can't see it in their head. Like, there's like Van Gogh is a perfect example. Like he couldn't visualize anything in his head. The reason you see so many self-portraits of him is because he couldn't imagine things. That's why Starry Night was like such a great thing for him, because it was the first time that one of the first times that he was able to like really just like put it out there. So for everybody, it's different. So I find that if you can draw it and you can point to it and say, nope, that's what it looks like right there, decision made, next.
That'll also save you a lot of money and time when you do
big
come
time.
to the process
In the
of
post, right.
hiring. So I think this happens in games a lot. Like if you're indie, whether you're solo, you got to do something to get started and get your idea together. And then even if you are able to get funding for it, you're still going to be kind of on a shoestring budget. So the clearer you can be about exactly what you need and exactly what you don't need, like the faster people will be, which will be good for you, but also the less expensive all that overhead will be as well.
The whole of the creative experience is having an idea in your head and then just trying to make it more and more tangible. And the moment that you put pen to paper, you're making it more tangible. And then you can say, no, I hate this. But while it's just, people think the idea in the head is the most valuable thing. No, it's bashing out 300 storyboards to work out like, oh, I've only got half a story and I need another subplot with the sister. That's actually the film. It's not, oh, I want to do a family drama about the sister, blah, blah. Everyone has that idea. It's the execution. And the more that you can, and as well, pen and paper is the cheapest it's ever going to be for you to make mistakes, right? You try making a mistake when you've hired a camera crew and you get your dailies back and you're like, oh, no, I didn't get the shot of the we've all been on that movie where you're like, oh, yeah, we didn't plan and I thought I could wing it, I just never want to go on to film. I did enough film sets in my early career where someone's walking around the stage doing a bit of this, doing a bit of like, oh, where's the angle? No, thank you. I want to see your storyboards. I want to see before I'm going to turn up to your horror movie set at like 11 o'clock at night to start a 14-hour day. Oh, yeah, we've all done that. Been on that movie.
Thank you.
Make it tangible. That's the thing. Make it more and more tangible.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have time, and I apologize, for 2 more questions. So we will take your question, and then we will take your question.
What if we go fast?
Hi, my name is Agastya Warrior. I'm a student of SVA. I just graduated from computer arts. I've been learning about virtual production a lot since The Mandalorian. But I feel like there's a barrier between the LED walls and what I can showcase in my own reels. What would you suggest would be the right path for me to take in terms of trying to show that I know about these LED walls but don't have the hardware and facilities to actually have the LED wall behind me and use it to the best of its capabilities?
I would say look at Noah Cadner or Matt Workman's work. They're showing you how you can do it at home with a small green screen setup and then just create a reel that you can show to people.
Green screen with a tracked camera is a very overlooked workflow in this regard, particularly in the indie space. And I think that is going to be really huge once people work that out. It might help to get a Blackmagic Ultimatte, which is a linear keyer, an inline keyer. Even before that though, if I don't know if you're using an engine or anything, but
Unreal Engine, yeah, I'm using.
Well, make some previs.
Right.
Because then you can put a shape, which would be the LED wall, and then you can put a photo on the LED wall and work out what's happening in front of it.
Yeah.
Put some models down and.
That's what I was going to say, is really if you're using Unreal Engine, there's your visualization. Make stuff within the engine and, fake it till you.
Yeah.
And I don't think people are looking for you to show on your reel that you were at a stage and you ran the whole stage. I think there's just, what they're looking for is just that you have the ability to do that and you know what you're doing within that space. Unreal Engine, if you know it, then you have the power at your fingertips.
Yep.
There's a very interesting thing between, the engineering component of all of this, and by that I mean coding, using an engine, and then the artistic side. And each of those sides has a very different way of talking about the work. And I think the kind of thing that we've been talking about, and certainly the networking conversations, is developing a vocabulary where you can talk about your own work to other people. That's the thing that'll get you interested. It's developing the work as well, but as you do that work, you'll be able to talk to a DP about the camera problems in Unreal, and using the camera in sequencer, and then it's always like 50 miles from where you put it last time you opened your project. Just mentioning that, and people are like, "Oh, Unreal, right?" That is an engineering thing, but then when you get into the artistic side, then you need to be talking in terms of color, tone, emotion. Now, in a job interview, I don't think you're expected to have like this finely
whole
nuanced,
thing,
artistic, moving scene. What we want to know is, did you have kind of control over your camera? Could you kind of do some basic layout? And they're the entry-level jobs. But if you can talk on both sides of that, I was doing this engineering thing because I really wanted to evoke a sunset. That's the sweet spot. And then you can kind of then allow the person you're talking to guide their interest into what they're talking about in your work.
But also, like, in terms of resources, there are a bunch of stages that were started by students. So go out to those stages. There's one in Brooklyn. W Labs, and
Zero
then
Space.
Todd from NYU has his stage that he's always welcoming students to come in and take a look at it and try and test. Reach out to him. There's one, I think, in the Brooklyn Yards. I think I might have that person's contact.
That's
That's the
W
same
Lab.
one.
Yes.
That's Tommy Wu and his
Yes,
team.
exactly. So they're always welcoming students. So go try things out. I have another Keshfrem, like he started as a student. Get in touch with him. Like I can get you in touch with him. Like there's so many resources for students where people are not charging too much for, or maybe sometimes nothing. If their stage is sitting empty, they'll have you like go and try out whatever you need to try out. So I think networking a little bit might help you.
Because there's not really it'll be right on the night. Like, you won't get to a place and then people are like, oh, now we're going to fill your head with all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, people want to know that you've been along this journey, and then they'll be like, oh, yeah, we can have someone do that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Preetha. I'm a graduate student at NYU Steinhardt studying media culture and communications. So I am a huge film person. I hope to produce some films of my own someday, or maybe if I get a good script. But lately I've seen, ever since the writer's strike and the SAG strike, the moment AI comes up in a production, it is instantly met with a lot of polarizing reactions from audiences, especially with productions such as, I know Cuckoo used AI, I know Late Night with the Devil used AI in their production. And the moment it was mentioned in the news that AI was used in their production design or sound effects, it was instantly met with like, oh no, here we go again. So as a producer, if I do become a producer,
You will.
what is the best way I can establish boundaries between the usage of AI and the usage of practical effects so that the creative integrity of a project remains intact?
This is a great question.
Yeah.
I just want to say from, a gaming industry perspective that I know just how divisive AI is right now. It's a very touchy subject, so it's interesting to see that also applies to film.
Yeah, I mean, I won't say I have the answer to this. It's a very controversial topic, and I don't think I can give you a firm answer. But my belief in AI is that for us right now, it just takes away the mundane tasks, the creative mindset, the human touch, the humanness to creativity. I don't think AI is going to take that away anytime soon.
Right.
I think if you're authentic to your story, your craft, it is a controversial topic. It might stay controversial for a very long time. There's, in our business, there's a lot of legal ramification of credit given where credit's worth. And with AI, like, who are you giving credit to? It's the entire
It
internet,
can't be
right?
cleared. As it exists at the moment,
Yeah.
AI cannot be cleared.
Yeah, it's
And you can't sell a television show without it being cleared. Like,
no, it can't, and that's why there's so much legal jargon around it, and we're not able to tap into sort of the versatility and the power of AI just yet. But I do think that, I know it's a philosophical answer and not so much a tangible one, but you need humans to make sure that you tap into the power of AI also.
I agree. I mean, I will say, like, so when I was in VC, like, the whole thing was looking at new technologies that were, like, disrupting, and, you know, like, we saw plenty of them with like, I don't know if people would remember this, but, like, when Netflix had a streaming product, when it very first launched it, like, the stock like tanked because people were like streaming on, like, going to see, like, not watching TV on your not watching TV on the TV, not going to films. Like, it was so, you know, things haven't been this divisive before, but plenty of things have been divisive. I think the people who dictate the future of how those things actually act in the world tend to be those who are quite familiar with the technology, even if they don't like it. And so I'll say for AI is currently, like, very hot topic in gaming. It's really hot topic in engineering because there's sort of this paradox where, like, all the engineers are like, AI is going to take over the world. We're never going to have jobs again. And yet there are, like, it's really hard to hire engineers. But the engineers who actually use it, there's kind of a meme where, like, the engineers who actually use AI know that it's, like, not, there's many things it's really not good at. And
Yep.
it's really not good at, like, abstract reasoning. It will not get good at abstract reasoning for a while until they're using, like, new technology to do AI stuff. So there's a lot of stuff it's not good at. And so a lot of engineers I know who are more seasoned do use it but they use it within a context of what they know it's good at. And there's a meme of, like, the tech CEO who's trying to, like, save money and fire all their engineers or they can't hire them. And they're just like, we're going to use AI now. And they make, like, really, really bad products because AI, if you just let it run wild, it would be like having a, you know, first year intern, like, run wild. It's kind of got the same capacity. So I think developing a deep familiarity with it will be a net positive, even if you elect never to use it, because you'll at least know how to make, like, you know, what I think folks would consider an informed and compelling case as to why you shouldn't use it in a particular context, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the consensus with AI, at least in gaming, and it seems to be the same in film and TV, is that AI should make our jobs easier and not replace
Not
our
replace
jobs.
it, right? Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've had people approach me saying, oh, you know, we want to do this project where you insert a script into this thing, then it spits out all the storyboard and it'll do a breakdown. And it's like, well, do you know what a breakdown and storyboards are actually for? It's not some busy work that you need to get through to get your script approved. It's a director and the team trying to work out how to shoot something. And there's a lot of do-overs, and there's a lot of, like, no, the framing isn't good on this. It's not just pretty pictures about what we're going to... You're talking about distance from subject, you're talking about all the inclusions about what's on the virtual wall, what's not, how your characters interact, whether they've got enough... All of this, the AI doesn't do that. It just makes a pretty frame.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not work to be rushed through. And also, I think, certainly in the independent space, a lot of people just have pitch decks where all the characters look like kind of Pixar characters. And I think AI is increasingly having a huge effect in visual effects because you don't want to rotoscope because no one wants that job.
And you like the finessing that AI does and, like,
and like matte extraction and being able to retexture something, put mud on, all those things are great. But I don't think that there's going to be a world where someone's just prompting them in Starbucks to make a
No.
You know, the thing you always see, and LinkedIn is really upsetting sometimes. It's like, look, I've done this trailer, and it's this thing I was talking about, the engineer or the creative, right? So, and someone who's focused on engineering can do something where it's like, oh, look, this looks like a subject. It's just that there's no dialogue, none of their lips move, and it's all a slow pan.
Yeah.
Like, if you approach it from the artistic side, that is boring.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in the slightest. As an engineering exercise, meh, as well. Like, oh, yeah. I always just write, oh, this took me 2 days to do. And I'm like, would it get better if you spent more time? No, it doesn't get any better. I'm sorry. You know, that's the way I feel about it.
I hope you have this problem.
Yes.
You're never going to know what the right move is until you made it. I mean, seriously, like, until you get there, it's, I don't know. I've gone to so many AI talks in the past year, and this is the common denominator.
Yeah. Nobody knows.
And I think if you were making, like, A Scanner Darkly, right? I don't know if you know that film.
Yeah.
Painstakingly rotoscoped every frame, redrew it. that you do that in AI, you know.
Yeah.
And then you'd ask yourself, why are you doing that?
Right.
Like, and it comes back to the thing: is there a level of expression that a human should have influence over to do a scanner darkly, or is it just about Instagramming something that you paste across
Right.
the image? That's in essence what you're asking yourself. Do you want the work to endure, or is it like something you're just posting on LinkedIn and everyone forgets?
Tribeca had like 4 films, I think, this year that were AI. It was like there was like the Sora section of AI, and the few people that I talked to who saw it just said soulless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I assume this is the correct crowd, but I don't know if you all have seen the AI trailer for the live action Princess Mononoke.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
That is floating around
Yes.
Twitter
Yep.
and getting absolutely we don't need to worry about AI quite yet, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we do if that becomes just a baseline for what people,
What's acceptable?
what's acceptable.
but you think consumers would adopt it?
I think it's
mean-
I think it's as much like a commentary on how much low quality content is acceptable on the internet, because it is, whether it's AI or just someone like on their phone or who knows what, like it is there's so much noise regardless.
But also, it's like, what is acceptability? Like, if it is going viral on Twitter, is that acceptable as
But
the
not going
quality?
viral for the correct reason.
Yes, exactly. Like, is it going, like, would someone sit and watch a whole AI movie, pay to
Yeah, I
watch
guess
an
that's-
AI-generated movie in a theater
That's the
and be
question.
hooked for the entire 2.5 hours?
Yeah. Well, I think we should just do a separate talk on AI.
Yeah.
Because I think we could talk about this topic forever. So what a great last question to end on. But unfortunately, that is it for tonight. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you guys so much.